to be with you and to serve on your State Board of Education. I'm 4.5 years into an 8-year term, so you can see from my gray hairs I'm set until retirement. Now, some people wonder what what you do on the State Board, and we just finished our most important task constitutionally. We chose a new superintendent of public instruction. And if you followed that story, you know that a very, some would say, shrill spokesman for the union interests and the traditional school concerns was a candidate. She openly campaigned for it, and because of you had a couple of Republicans on the State Board, we were able, they eliminated our favorite, so we eliminated their favorite, and then we ended up with Mr. Brian Whiston, whose background is not professional education. So we will have at least a fair shooter as our superintendent, and not someone who is ideologically committed to the establishment as we have known it over many years. So superintendent search. Another is I've had the honor and the privilege of speaking for charter schools. Last summer, you may recall, a bunch of half-truths came out from the Detroit Free Press. And they quoted liberally from two of my colleagues on the State Board of Education. And we were able to at least put out the other side of charter schools, why they make sense for Michigan students. One of the interesting arguments that my colleagues made is that they're overcharging for rent. Well, so I introduced on the State Board the matter of prevailing wage policies. How these cost millions of dollars, and I was able to share that and advocate on our State Board. Now they killed it in the agenda committee because we don't have a Republican majority. But at least we were able to put that out publicly as a counter to the somewhat insincere concerns that certain members of the State Board have about charter schools wasting money. Talk about straining at the gnat and ignoring the cannon. Another issue was recently, there was, you may recall, a woman in Detroit was being evicted, and those who were evicting discovered 2 of her children frozen in a freezer. She had reported to somebody who asked where the children were that she was homeschooling. This became the pretext for legislators and some members of our State Board to call for regulation of all homeschoolers and having them register, etc. I was able to point out in the press and in the meeting that she had lied, and it's liars that we should be dealing with and legislating against, not homeschoolers. Now, the biggest issue, I think, that has gotten scarce attention from conservatives has been the rise of the call for more preschool education. Yeah. This is an example of insanity. If 12 years of public schooling isn't doing you any good, then we'll add more. Now, the sad fact is that there are some students who are better off in a preschool program with 11 other kids and an adult than at home. And I guess I support preschool for those families that need it. But that's at most 20% of the population. Studies have shown, and the dirty secret no one wants to admit, is traditional schooling holds kids' development back. That's why homeschooling is such a powerful tool, because you surround kids with adults, they start talking like an adult, thinking like an adult, acting like an adult.
That's right.
And unfortunately, the practice of hurting kids is what causes them to delay their development. That is particularly true for preschool. I'm not saying that there's no role for preschool, but certainly universal preschool is something that we should be opposing at every turn. One of the lies that's put out there is that for every dollar we invest in a preschool child, we're going to get $3 at the end of the term. I've read several of these studies, and they're all BS. My kids got excellent. You know, one study came out from a guy in Kalamazoo, and he said Michigan would get 3 times as much. And, well, my kids got a great education in Detroit. My kids went to Detroit public schools. They got a great education. They got great jobs in New York, Massachusetts, and California. And again, another lie is that if we have excellent education, that it will attract business. It's the other way around, friends. Business attracts great and here's the truth, okay? A mother or father who foregoes a minimum wage job to spend full time with their child is investing at least $16,000 a year in that child, which is a whole lot more than anyone is proposing for these expensive preschool programs at state expense. If you want to invest in your child, spend the time during that short time that they're in your hands. I've had the privilege of serving on commissions that have sometimes wanted race-based explanations for things. I served on a commission that looked at suspension, and they said, oh, black children are much more likely to be suspended than white children, and that's racism in the system. I've pointed out that the suspension rates were higher in the black-owned and controlled districts like Detroit than they were in the other districts, and the response was that black teachers too could be prejudiced. Isn't that an interesting insight? And then I pointed out that the gap between boys and girls was much greater than the gap between blacks and whites. And obviously these are sexist suspensions. And there were 1 or 2 women on the commission that were ready to take up that, but the rest of the commission didn't want to deal with it. So it's been a real privilege to try to shed some light, a different perspective, maybe a bit of sanity on some of these government commissions. And thank you for entrusting me with that task on the state's Board of Education. Final 2 points. One is more and more one hears poor performance attributed to the nature of poverty, attributed to poverty. And there's a sense that that's true. But on the other hand, we assume that we can correct the problems of poverty with infusions of cash. Now, we've had 2 generations of the Great Society, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. Here is the uncomfortable truth that there are 4 values that correlate with escaping poverty: truth-telling, honesty with money, work ethic, and the most controversial of all, fidelity in marriage. Yes. These behaviors correlate with those who escape poverty. As Thomas Sowell says, blacks who are married, their poverty is in the single digits. Furthermore, I can attest from my own experience when I lived in poverty in the city of Detroit. I had kids that were valedictorian, went to Ivy League schools at U of M. My niece, who lives in Highland Park, and they're in poverty. Well, she's a valedictorian for charter school. It's not a poverty of money, it's a poverty of values. I am so appreciative that we have Snyder instead of Granholm. I view the glass as half full rather than half empty. But the proposal to turn Detroit schools around by filling with the structure misses the point. It's not the structure of Detroit public schools that's the cause for poor performance on the part of the kids. It's the values that we encourage. How can we encourage the right values from public policy? We're not asking those questions. I am raising them on the State Board of Education, but until we get a majority on that board, they will be ignored in favor of policies that favor the status quo. And finally, I had the privilege of opposing, dissenting from the state board's endorsement of the Prop 1. I also would like to credit my colleague Eileen Weiser, who has pointed out right now Michigan is one of the best funded school systems, and we have one of the lowest producing in terms of academics. We ought not imagine that putting more money into the system is going to lead